Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Superman and Lois Season 4 review series. And today I'm going to be talking about episode 3, Always My Hero, which I have just finished watching. And just when you thought this final season couldn't get any more emotionally charged, they come straight up to you, punch you square in the guts, and leave you with your jaws hanging all over again. This episode featured not one, not two, but three big surprises. One of them, its impact is definitely going to be felt throughout the rest of this final season. The other one is a game changing moment that occurs, which completely changes the entire dynamic of the show. And of course, the final one is something that happens right at the very end of this episode. And it's an ending I wasn't really expecting. I thought maybe it might go a different way. Obviously, they will explain how this is going to play out in the next few episodes. In my honest opinion, as we're now 3 episodes into the fourth and final season of Superman and Lois, I feel for the most part the show has done a tremendous job in adapting the Death of Superman story arc. Obviously, it's not completely the same as the graphic novel. They have made some changes. They've kind of put their own spin on things, which is fine with me. You know, as long as the storytelling is strong and the execution is well done, I have no issues with it whatsoever. I didn't expect them to add all of that crazy stuff that showed up in the graphic novel, like the Reign of Superman with the Eradicator, Steel Superboy, and Cyborg Superman. They've kind of done little things like that, but not quite the same. I didn't expect them to go down that route because that in itself would need to be told in a movie or maybe in another season, perhaps. So I never really expected them to go that way. But what I liked about this episode in particular, which just like this entire show has been, was absolutely excellent. The theme for this episode in particular was all about what it means to truly be a hero. And this had a very good message that you don't necessarily have to have powers to make a difference. And what happens in this episode really helps define that theme. This episode saw another character gets killed off, which I'll talk about in a moment. This episode really tugs at the heartstrings and really gets you teary, especially when you learn about why this character got killed off and what this character did at the end. It's a very emotionally charged episode, just like this entire season has been so far. As I mentioned earlier, we're now 3 episodes in, and this episode pretty much picks up where we left off from the end of episode 2. We saw Jordan trying to get their dad's heart back, but unfortunately that didn't happen as Lex pretty much trampled all over Superman's heart. And we saw at the end of episode 2, Superman is now an AI hologram in the fortress, and he pretty much told his family that I'll always be here to help you, but outside it's just going to have to be the three of you. So that was pretty much how episode 2 ended. It ended on a bit of a somber note as Jordan felt that he failed in trying to save his dad. So, with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 3, Always My Hero. So, this episode pretty much opens up with Lois speaking in the form of a eulogy. Now, at first, when you see this take place, it's a funeral, and we're all led to believe that the funeral is, of course, for Clark. But at the end of this episode, you quickly learn that the funeral wasn't for Clark, it was for someone else. So, throughout most of episode 3, we're treated to a number of different flashbacks, mostly involving Lois, Clark, and Sam Lane. So, throughout most of season 4 so far, we've been seeing flashbacks to when Lois and Clark first got together. So, in the first flashback for episode 3, we see Lois and Clark go to the DoD, meets with Sam Lane, and tell him that we have something we really want to tell you. It's really important. It's about Superman. And Clark very nervously says, I'm Superman. And Sam just pretty much laughs at him in his face and said, no, you're not. Don't be silly. And we get a really powerful moment where Clark stands up and takes off his glasses. And in what was quite possibly the most hilarious moment of the entire episode, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of the classic Christopher Reeve portrayal of Clark Kent. Clark takes off his glasses. Sam Lane stands there in shock, like, what? And Clark just pretty much quietly says, ta da! I thought that was really funny. And the next couple of flashbacks, we see Clark wanting Sam's blessing and his hand in marriage so that he can marry his daughter Lois. And of course, Sam, being the stubborn general that he is, says, no, I will not give you my blessing. It's too dangerous for Lois. Does Lois even realize what she's getting herself into? You know, what if something happens one day? You just can never be too sure. You know, you can't marry my daughter and be, you know, a figure for justice. And Clark pretty much wore his heart on his sleeve and said that I love Lois. I want to spend the rest of my life with her. I just thought by doing, you know, the right thing, we want your blessing. And Sam pretty much just says, looks like you've got to do what you've got to do. You know, why do you need my blessing for? So that was quite a good scene between the General and Clark, because the thing about General Sam Lane is while he does love Lois, he's a soldier first and a dad second. But what we get to see from him is he pretty much checks his soldier duty out the door and really comes through as a dad. And also in this episode throughout, Jonathan is continuously being angry at Jordan, you know, blaming him for not trying to save dad. And then suddenly Jonathan starts to get powers. Not just one or two, all of them. Now, this is something very interesting because throughout most of the show's run, Jordan has always been the one with powers and Jonathan has never had any. So you kind of knew deep down that Jonathan was going to get powers eventually. It was just a question of when. I never really expected him to get his powers this early. I thought maybe he would have got his powers maybe like episode 8 perhaps, maybe like towards the end. But for his powers to manifest this fast and for him to learn his powers that quick, whereas Jordan, it took him ages to really master his powers. Jonathan just picks up on it like, yep, flying, check, heat vision, check, ice breath, check, super speed, check. Yep, I've got this. You know, so it was quite a fun moment to finally see Jonathan get his powers. And the way he gets his powers, it's not really the way I would have expected. You know, Jonathan pretty much got his powers through anger. So he just got so mad and his powers started to come through. So I thought that was a really good moment. And we see that Doomsday is still out there under Lex's control. I don't care what anyone says. Anybody who knows the history of Doomsday, you cannot control him. You just can't. I've got a feeling that there's going to be a twist to this because, for the most part, this version of Doomsday, anyway, is pretty much bizarro. Whereas the real Doomsday, you couldn't control him. Doomsday is the ultimate destroyer, the ultimate soldier. You cannot control him. He's just a monster and he cannot be tamed. But it looks like, as far as this version of Doomsday is concerned, he's kind of become like Lex's unofficial pet, feeding him and checking in on him, even going as far as to call him his friend. It's quite weird and, disturbing in some places. But Lex Luthor was at his menacing best in this episode. He goes to see Jordan and pretty much says to him, stirring the pot, of course, that you do know that, you know, Jonathan is her favourite, not you. And he plays a recording of the phone call. Choose a number to save one of your sons. And of course, she chose to save Jonathan. And that led to a real emotionally charged moment where Jordan pretty much accuses Lois of being a liar, thanks to Lex. So Lex is really trying his best to ruin Lois's life and break up her family. And we also see in this episode John Henry and Natalie Irons. They have been officially recruited by the DoD as the world's new protectors as they go on a mission to try and stop Doomsday to no avail. And we also see in this episode one of Sam's men goes rogue and threatens him under the urging of Lex Luthor to give up the location of Lex's daughter. Sam, of course, refuses and says, I gave my word, I will never ever tell you where Elizabeth is. And of course, this leads to him getting shot. But after he gets shot, we see Sam inject himself with a serum containing Superman's blood, and he sacrifices himself as Doomsday snaps his neck, and we see Sam die. And which is a shame, really, because before we see Sam sacrifice himself, we see a moment in a flashback where, after back and forth hesitation and reluctance, we see Sam finally give his blessing to Lois to marry Clark. And to see Sam sacrifice himself after going up against Doomsday was quite shocking, but at the same time, very heroic because we know Sam is a soldier. He understands the risks of being on the field and the dangers that comes with the job. And for him to actually go up against Doomsday, this is essentially a human going up against a beast like Doomsday, really cemented himself as one of the show's most heroic characters. And the funeral that we see at the end wasn't actually for Clark, it was actually for Sam Lane. And right at that moment, we get a final shot of the fortress as we see Superman essentially wake up after being given Sam's heart. And that pretty much wraps up my review on episode 3, Always My Hero. Overall, this was an excellent episode, very emotionally charged, quite dark in some moments, but very well executed at the same time. Now, in terms of the whole resurrection thing, depending on who you ask or what version you go by, I always remembered Superman punching his way out of the grave, and he has the big long hair and that big humongous beard, and he gets the black suit straight after, which is like a solar power suit, which allows him to absorb the yellow sun's radiation, kind of like a battery charging himself up. I don't know if we're going to get the black suits in this season. I really hope we do because that's a big part of the resurrection. But I didn't really expect to see Superman come back to life this quick. I thought maybe we might get this in episode 4 or 5 perhaps, but I thought the way they handled everything was very well done. But as I said, we've essentially only got 10 episodes of this season. Maybe if we had a few more episodes, maybe they might have drawn this out a bit longer, but I'm okay with how they've done it. But I just kind of expected them to maybe draw this out just maybe for like one more episode and then get the big surprise, which is Superman coming back from the dead. But, for Sam to sacrifice himself, I really didn't expect that. I didn't expect him to die, but it works very well for the final season. So Lois loses her husband and now her dad. Wow. Poor Lois. That's all I've got to say. But very well executed. And, I think that Sam's death is more shocking than Superman's. I mean, yeah, Superman's death is still shocking, but I think Sam's is more shocking because it's totally unexpected, but at the same time, very well done. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What did you guys think of episode 3? Did you enjoy it? What did you think about Sam Lane getting killed off? Were you shocked? How do you feel about Sam essentially giving his heart to Superman for a chance to live? Do you think that was very noble? And also, what do you think about Jonathan getting superpowers now? Could he become the new Superboy for his final season? How does this change the dynamic between Jordan and Jonathan? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Superman and Lois Season 4 review series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.